And now we have RSX. Tim. Oh, it's Kevin, sorry.
As a reason in science society, our starting point is the scientific values of rationality, reason, logic, and skepticism. We represent null hypothesis. We acknowledge that we do not have all the answers, but we view the gaps as opportunities for further investigation. What's more, we believe that these gaps should remain just that, gaps, until there is sufficient evidence for the theories that would fill them. The burden of proof falls squarely on those advocating the alternative hypothesis. Additionally, all theories are open to scrutiny, as the scientific method depends on re-evaluation when new evidence becomes available. This means that scientific theories are dynamic and constantly updated, which gives us a significant advantage against theories that assert their conclusion without evidence or despite contrary evidence. With this in mind, let's start with the question of how we came into existence. 13.7 billion years ago, the universe existed in an extremely hot, dense state, which underwent exponential expansion in what has been termed the Big Bang. From this hot, dense state, the universe expanded and cooled. And as it cooled, the superhot plasma condensed to subatomic particles, then atoms, then larger elements. Over long periods of time, this matter accumulated in space, which led to the formation of gas clouds, condensing into stars. Our sun is a third-generation star of almost 5 billion years, made from the remnants of these very first stars. Our planet formed around the sun from dust clouds, which were caught in its gravitational pull. On this early Earth, the primitive oceans were abundant in simple organic compounds. This environment was suitable for chemical reactions, bridging the gap between life and non-life. Scientists such as Fox, Miller, and Urey have been successful in demonstrating that organic molecules necessary for life can arise from inorganic constituents. Life was first thought to appear 3.5 billion years ago. This life was much like the simple bacteria that we see today. Through random mutation and filtering through natural selection, some of these evolved into eukaryotes. Descendants of some of these then evolved into the first animals and plants. The plants and animal species that we see today, including humans, are only a tiny percentage of all that have ever lived on Earth. The last common ancestor of humans and chimpanzees was the Auroran tugenensis, which lived around 6 million years ago. Homo sapiens emerged 160,000 years ago. We can then use evolutionary thinking to understand morality, which is what we'll address next. Humans are social animals, so those who have pro-social tendencies will have the advantage and be more evolutionarily successful. Similarly, societies that live according to moral virtues, such as looking out for each other, are more likely to thrive. Thus, evolution gives a descriptive account of how morality came to be. But the question requires a further element of how we actually ought to be. Humanist morality focuses on rationality, critical thought, and the understandings that humans are ultimately responsible for developing a moral way of life using the faculties that are available to us. Our understanding of what is moral and immoral lies in our knowledge of individual and societal interests, and searching within frameworks of empathy, compassion, cooperation, etc. These tenets stood among others during the abolishment of slavery, the recognition of the suffragettes, and the striving for equality for the gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender community. Paul Kurtz is the founder of the Council for Secular Humanism, a professor of philosophy. His foundation for humanist ethics includes common moral decencies. These elementary virtues are personal integrity, such as telling the truth, being sincere and keeping promises; trustworthiness, such as loyalty, reliability, and responsibility; benevolence, and fairness. Kurtz also describes a list of ethical excellences. These are autonomy, intelligence, self-discipline, self-respect, creativity, high motivation, an affirmative attitude toward life, joyful living, and finally, a concern for good health. This is certainly not an exhaustive list, but it goes towards demonstrating a variety of values found within a secular account of morality. There are a variety of frameworks that ethical theorists have developed for understanding the foundation of morality. Discussion between naturalistic and non-naturalistic theorists has produced amazing insight into the nature of morality, which extends far beyond the limited framework of supernaturalism and grounds moral objectivism. So morality plays a central role in living a fulfilling life on this earth. Now we'll move on to the topic of an afterlife. There is no substantiated evidence for the existence of an afterlife, but rather the natural fear of death, along with ambition, creates an understandable desire for a hereafter. One of the explanations for the appeal of an afterlife is our fear of the unknown and our non-existence. Additionally, the idea of an afterlife often incorporates reward and punishment, giving a sense of overarching justice, chaperoning an unjust world. But it seems to us that the afterlife doesn't actually fulfill these roles. It can even exaggerate the injustices in this world. This is because belief in an afterlife helps people to rationalize injustices in this world, such as poverty and tyranny. Furthermore, an eternal afterlife is itself unjust, because it is never really just to infinitely punish or reward someone for finite deeds. Also, our understanding of punishment and reward in the afterlife is that it is not only tied to our good or bad actions, but also our religious beliefs. This makes our eternal well-being in the afterlife dependent on morally arbitrary factors such as where we were born and what belief systems we were brought up in. Does this mean that two people with the same moral value but with different beliefs also have different chances of punishment and reward? If yes, then it demonstrates an egotistical God with questionable moral virtues. If no, then there would be no need to bother with belief and religion, since it would have no bearing on the result, and would waste time that could otherwise be spent doing good. Finally, lack of belief in an afterlife serves to highlight the value of this life on earth. Is there an afterlife? Sorry. If there is an afterlife, then this becomes merely a doormat to the next world, serving only as a place to wipe your feet before entering the eternity of the afterlife. By contrast, the skeptical view says that this life is all that has been proven to exist, which makes it more valuable and encourages us to make the most of it. So this brings us to the final question. How do we make the most of it? And why are we here? Firstly, who is we? Is it just us in this room? The human species? All living things on Earth? Can extraterrestrial species have meaning? Is meaning universal and overarching, or is it personal and relative to each being? If you ask 10 people what gives their lives meaning, I imagine you may get 10 different responses. Would you really accuse 9 of these people of being wrong? Of course not. Meaning is relative to the individual, and furthermore, relative to an individual's life. What gives you meaning, will be quite different from what gives me meaning. What's more, what gave you meaning 5 years ago was probably quite different to now, as it will be again in 10 years' time. To dictate that everyone's life must have the same meaning is not only absurd, it's arrogant. The lack of universal meaning superimposed on our lives is empowering. In the words of Camus, people can instead strive to be heroic nihilists. Living with dignity in the face of absurdity, living with secular saintliness, fraternal solidarity, and rebelling against and transcending the world's indifference. The advance of science has shown that the universe was not designed for us. Thanks. In fact, it does not care about us. Rather, we are one minutely small component in an immensely vast universe, and our lives are extraordinarily brief. It is poignant that our significance arrives through our ability to comprehend our insignificance, for it allows us the opportunity to create our own meaning and make our lives worthwhile. That's it. Thank you.